India has undergone urbanization at a phenomenal rate in the past 30 years. However, this urbanization is occurring in concurrence with multiple environmental crises across various cities. Uttarakhand in the north of India is experiencing heavy river flooding and landslides annually since 2011. Chennai in the south of India has faced several water shortages and water related crises since 2019. And this year, the country's capital of New Delhi has managed to achieve a toxic level in its air quality. As of today, it has reached a level of toxicity that the Supreme Court has asked all construction sites to halt construction. However, this has not in any way reduced the rate of urbanization happening all across the country. This urbanization and expansion is leading to two forms of architecture. The first, which is an instrument of economy, which has led to infrastructure and rational engineered structures, and the second, which is an exercise of image making used by the state to legitimize their economic policies. To better understand this, let's look at the state of Gujarat, which is considered to be the ideal model of development for the country. Gujarat in the past 30 years has managed to achieve a higher GDP growth compared to that of India. If Gujarat was a country, it would be the third fastest growing economy after China and South Korea. And in this process, over the past 30 years, Gujarat has come to be a home to giant corporate infrastructure projects like Asia's largest solar park, world's largest oil refinery, multiple private ports, multiple captive coal plants. All these industrial complexes are pushed and promoted as projects in public interest, but they are mostly private owned and have a judicial clearance to pollute the environment. In concurrence, the state has pushed millions of dollars in projects like the Mahatma Mandir and the Statue of Unity. These projects are shallow interpretations of culture by scholars and critics and are used by the state to push their economic policies and rebrand the state's identity. Within Gujarat, Kutch is the epicenter when it comes to industrial activity and ecological change. Kutch is the largest district in Gujarat. It is home to several nomadic communities like the cattle rearing Maldari community and the salt miners community of Agarias. The entire Gulf of Kutch is a marine biodiversity reserve which supports various flora and fauna and is also home to deep water coral reefs. But Kutch also is a home to the Mundra port and more than 12 captive coal plants and industries responsible for major carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide pollution. The district of Kutch faces various environmental and humanitarian crises. The bunny grasslands in the north of Kutch are facing depletion. Various communities practicing livestock rearing are impacted by this. And as mentioned earlier, the district is one of the highest air polluters in the country. Let's understand the spatial footprint of how this district causes pollution. The western coast of Kutch, as shown in this map, is colonized by various industrial spatial products responsible for massive amounts of pollution. These range from captive coal plants to factories and other chemical industries. All of these are connected to one another and through the larger economy through highways, which can be seen in this map. The district is landlocked on its eastern administrative boundary, but if we look at the coastline, it is an island. The eastern coast is not a coast with the ocean, but an inland coast along the Little Run of Kutch. The Little Run of Kutch are low-lying salt flats. These salt flats get flooded in the monsoon from the surrounding highlands. As industrial farming increases in the surrounding highlands, the low-lying lands over the past 10 years are getting flooded with water, which is rich with fertilizers, and this is altering the geology of the salt flats. Salt flats are becoming salt marshes with grasslands and vegetation clusters. As shown by these NDVI maps, the low-lying lands of the Little Run of Kutch on the eastern coast are undergoing various geological changes in terms of their groundwater capture and the change in their vegetation index. The eastern coast appears dark and uninhabited, but it is equally an active part in the state's industry. The eastern coast of Gujarat is colonized by a different kind of a spatial product. The Little Run of Kutch is colonized all along its periphery and its inner plains by a spatial product of the salt pans, operated and managed by families from the Agaria community that practice salt mining in this region.
It's nearing the scorching temperature of 40 degrees Celsius in the little Rann of Kutch, the eastern end of India's largest salt plain.
પછી આવીને પેલા સાપરું બાંધી આવી 4 દાડા સાપરું બાંધતા થાય સાપરું બાંધી લેવી એટલે પછી આ કુઈ ગારવી આ કુઈ ગારે એટલે એનું પાણી પછી આમ ચાલુ કરવી એટલે ન્યા ઓલી કોદારી હોય કે ને અહીંયાથી આમ ન્યા ધોરીઓ ગારતું જ આવે. પછી જીમ કાપાઈમાં ઓલી આહાડી પડે ને આવી એ કપાઈ આહાડી થાય મીઠું પછી થાય પછી રોજે રોજ કાપવાનું પછી એ મીઠું પછી કાપી રહે ને એટલે પછી પાણી વાળવાનું પાવડીએ પછી આવા રોજ દંતારા ખેંચવાના ખેંચ્યા નહીં રોજે રોજ દંતારા ખેંચવાના પછી જીમ દંતારા ખેંચી મીઠું સડે થાતું જાય મોટું.
Salt production is indigenous to the Rann and Gulf of Kutch, as it is a salt wasteland. Kutch accounts for 80% production of India's total salt needs and delivers 7,000 tons of edible salt every day across the country. Salt production in this region has exponentially increased in concurrence with other industrial activity. Salt is a key raw material in the chemical industry, which booms in the state. This community is operating and living in this region since 400 years, practicing salt mining. They are oblivious to the geological changes happening in the region and what it could mean for their way of life. However, the temperatures in this region are consistently rising, creating very harsh conditions for life. Along with rise in vegetation within the little Rann of Kutch, mangroves are experiencing a rise in the state's coastline. By utilizing these ongoing geological changes in this region, we can create biodiversity hotspots within the industrial landscape for carbon capture. We can use architecture as a tool to generate this. If we equip the 40,000 nomadic families operating in the little Rann of Kutch with a device which can help them cultivate their own fuel through mangrove plantations, they can uplift their economy, and in this process, we can transform the territory from being an industrial landscape to a biodiversity supporting carbon sink. After the community descend into the run, they first of all build shelter for themselves using bamboo structures with jute and plastic sheets for the skin. They choose the higher ground in the identified site for the shelter, while the lower plains for salt farming. The restructuring begins by introducing the apparatus, which is a mobile metal structure which can provide a shaded space in the harsh sun in the temperature of 50 degrees Celsius. As the salt miners gradually construct the salt pan after descending into the run, post the monsoons, they can use the apparatus to restructure the salt pans with plinths, enhance water channels, and cultivate mangrove plantations. These plinths and channels are made by simply manipulating the earth available from the ground on site and using vernacular construction techniques. The apparatus can be constructed on site with prefabricated components. Using the apparatus, the miners can move earth to begin the restructuring. The earth extracted from enhancing the water channel can be used to construct the plinth. Using the apparatus as an anchor, tents for shading can be erected around the channels, reservoirs, and plantations as they are constructed. By restructuring the salt pans with plinths and plantations, we can integrate the salt pans, infrastructure, shelter, and the mangrove plantations into one and make the process of salt farming more hospitable for the community practicing it. The water channels will allow a smooth transition for the rainwater to escape, and in case of major flooding, the channels can capture the washed out salt. A rainwater collection pit can be positioned on the lower slope of the pan to collect and harvest more rainwater for year-long use. These plinths and channels are made by simply manipulating the earth available from the ground on site and using vernacular construction techniques. The plinths can be strengthened using the technique of Litte, which the community already practices. Kinds of organic materials like straw and manure, among others, to make a paste used to finish and waterproof walls. These mangroves can be systematically grown in a fashion where they can act as storm barriers for the salt pans and the shelters. When the plains get flooded during the monsoon, the plains will not get washed out and the plantations will thrive because of the water capture in the reservoirs. The mangroves can be salvaged for cooking fuel and as fodder for livestock like cows, buffaloes, and camels. As the plinths get constructed, smaller enclosures can be constructed along the salt pans using similar vernacular techniques of cob walls and bamboo structures. These can be used as schools for children living in the pans. Similarly, an infirmary can be set up for emergencies. The gradual restructuring of the salt pans will integrate plantations as a part of the landscape. These plantations are organic infrastructural objects which are alien to this geology, but will gradually transform the landscape to mitigate rising temperatures and to support biodiversity. In this fashion, the apparatus can be a mobile device which keeps floating in the region, and the plantations will also be an element that will keep floating, fluctuating, flourishing, and expanding in their own way. In Gujarat, where buildings with strong formal designs and rigorous engineering have come to represent growth and economic prowess, the salt pans can be restructured with plantations to create a landscape of climatic conscience constructed with sustainable community building methods, leading to acres of biodiversity supporting hotspots and the very crucial carbon capture that we need. The resultant landscape will formally contradict the concrete master plans, as it will be organic in form, communal in ownership, and will carve out a new inland coastline within the territory. Thank you.